Hello, welcome to another episode of God Family Politics, where I get to talk about my three favorite things. One, I get to talk about the Lord. Two, if I feel like talking about family, I can talk about family. And three, I get to talk about politics. Today, I have Neil Mammen with us today, and Neil is one of the co-founders of Every Black Life Matters. And so, Neil, welcome to the show. I hear that you're doing some traveling right now.
Yeah, well, we just came back from Turning Point USA's America Fest.
Tell us about Turning Point. I've heard of it before, but I'm not really familiar with everything.
Okay, so Turning Point was started by Charlie Kirk, who at the time when he started, I think he was probably 18 or 19. Very smart young man who had a ability to take facts and remember them and then use them in discussions. And he developed that technique, and he goes around different college campuses talking and engaging with the people that we would consider are the most socialistic today. That's college students.
Yeah.
So his ministry has grown. I shouldn't say ministry, but his organization has grown a lot. And so they had this thing called America Fest. There was about 10,000 people there. A lot of them were youth. So we're talking about high school and college. So it's a very exciting time. A lot of great speakers. Candace was there. Candace Owens was there, and her husband, and a bunch of other great speakers. And of course, my co-founder, Kevin McGarry, was on the stage talking about Every Black Life Matters.
We just talked to him a little while ago. So it sounds like y'all are out there partying. Okay, tell the truth, shame the devil. Y'all are out there partying together, having a good time. Neil actually born in India, India.
No, in Ghana, actually.
Ghana, okay.
Yeah, Africa, yeah.
But it sounds like you've been all over the place. Jamaica, Sudan,
Yep.
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, yep.
So tell me, what are some of your favorite countries?
Well, the United States. And I can honestly say it's interesting because I've traveled all over the world. As a kid, I traveled, as I said, as you mentioned, I was born in Ghana, grew up in Jamaica, Ethiopia, Sudan, Yemen, and India. And then I came to the United States. And then after I started working here, I got a job flying around the world, teaching other people how to use technology. I'm an electrical engineer, computer engineer. And so I would fly around teaching people how to, like we did the very first MPEG encoder. So the very first MPEG video was done by my company. I was one of the two guys who helped design the very first MP3 player back in 1989.
Wow.
So, we've had a good run, and I would travel to all these countries: Taiwan, Hong Kong, China, Sweden, Norway, England. I mean, everywhere, right?
I see that you co-founded 5 startup companies in Silicon Valley. Yeah. You're an author. I mean, you got your hands in a pot, and you've been writing. And so the startup companies, tell me about your startup companies. Are you still involved with those, or did you just start them up and then sell them like some people do?
No, unfortunately, I started them up and we were never, a lot of companies don't make it. Our companies, some of them made it, some of them didn't. But unfortunately, I didn't make enough money to retire rich.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to borrow $5 then, because I was about to ask you.
Well, I think I
can borrow $5.
It's the 500,000 I don't know. But one of the companies we first started was designed to bring you video to the home. This is 1994.
Wow.
So it was Netflix before Netflix was around, and we designed an entire ecosystem.
Stuck with it. You should have stuck with it.
Yeah. Well, the problem was I had 100 employees, and we were designing it, and it was all delivering. And our goal was to deliver video to the home, just like Netflix. So digital cable, basically. The problem was in 1998 came by, and Pac Bell said, "Oh, we'll have 1.5 megabits to the home all over the country. At least in California, you can use that to deploy it." 1998 came by. We had this huge payroll, and Pac Bell says, "Oh, it's gonna take us a few more years to get that bandwidth out there," and at that point we can sustain it. So
the internet has come such a long way, and and in some ways that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, so you have multiple degrees: computer engineering, electrical engineering. I mean, okay, so what I'm getting to is that Neil Mammen is not a stupid man. As a matter of fact,
Thank you.
we're dealing with a very intelligent man right here. And so I was building up to that because um now we're living in a time where I feel like people have lost their ever loving sense.
Yep.
And coming from, and I really didn't know where I was going with this interview. I just tend to, they allow me to stay on the air and here in Houston. And so, I just go with it until they finally kick me off. And so, but where I'm going with this is that you've been to a lot of different countries, and I know you ended up in America and you stayed here. So let's talk, and let's not point out any particular country, because I know that sometimes when you're a native of a certain country and you say certain things, it can put a target on your back, and so that's not what I'm trying to do. But tell us some of the differences, in the direction that our country is going right now. We have a government right now that is seated, that is just they're hell bent on bringing socialism, turning it into a socialism. Now they'll still be in charge and have money and have food and everything else, but the poor little peons, those of us, will be having to lean on them for everything,
Right.
and for the grace of the government.
Right.
So, can you please talk about some of the comparisons of the
Well,
things
I think,
you've seen?
yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the countries that I've been in, many of them are very socialistic and they've never worked. The problem is there's two big problems that you have with socialism. One is you assume that everybody will work as hard as they can and only use as much or only take as much as they need.
Mm.
But because of human nature, we know that sin nature, the seven deadly sins: greed, gluttony, avarice, jealousy, pride, all that stuff, right? Well, two of them are laziness, sloth, and greed, right? So these are the two. So rather than everybody working as hard as they can and only taking what they need, they really work as little as they need and they take as much as they can.
Wow.
Laziness and the greed, right? And so what happens is you run out of resources. You simply run out of resources in socialism. There is no good reason for you to compete in the marketplace if everything is going to be given to you for free. But worse than that, it's bad for the human spirit. We were designed by God to strive greatly and continue striving and enjoy the striving. Work was given to Adam before man fell.
Absolutely.
Work
Absolutely.
is a blessing from God, and when we work, if you look at people who are demoralized and all that, it's because they can't work, or they're working something that they don't think is of any value, right? So work was given by God for us to enjoy ourselves and to participate with God in His creation. And so socialism takes all that away and turns it around. And I wanted to add one thing: the people who have bought into this lie are mainly the youth, because for the last 50, 70 years, the Marxists realized back in the 1930s and the 1940s that the only way they would ever get America to become a communist country is if they could brainwash the kids from the beginning. Because they tried that in the 1930s, nobody went for it. They all rejected it, and they realized it's because we had such an independent spirit that there was no way we were going to do it. So John Dewey basically invaded the public school system and then reformatted over the years slowly. So where now what we're producing is a bunch of socialists who don't realize that socialism has never worked. Now, some people say, well, look at Sweden, but even Sweden has abandoned socialism. They're a very socialistic country, but they've abandoned socialism. They say it doesn't work because they realize that after they brought in full-on socialism, they lost everything. Even ABBA left Sweden. Right. So,
Wow.
Volvo went under, all these things, the value was not there because the work ethic was not there. And so this is the the reality of socialism. So all the countries I've been to, India is very socialistic in some senses. It's not in other senses. But the second big thing that I mentioned, I said there were two things. One was socialism. The second thing is corruption.
Mm.
If you go to any country now, the corruption is deep-seated and rooted right at the beginning. And this is the problem, is because if you don't have a Protestant work ethic, if you don't have a Protestant sin and justice ethic, then you don't have a personal relation. So let me explain why. If you have a religion or no religion, then you are not responsible to a supreme being.
That's right.
For your morals, right? It's whatever. If you're an atheist, it's whatever I can get, whatever I can do. But if you have a religion that's based on checks, on balances, in other words, if I do good things, it's outweighed by the evil, evil and good are outweighed. So the problem with that is I can take a bribe today from you, but as long as I go to the temple tomorrow and I say a few prayers, I'm even. So I can take bribes, I can take corruption, I can do that. But in a Protestant ethic country, you can't do that because you are responsible directly to God for your sin. And if you repent, he is willing to forgive you, but you've got to be repentant. I can't go and spend some money, say a few, prayers or whatever. I have to be repentant. So these are the two things I've seen in all these countries, is that you've got to have that Protestant ethic of good and bad and evil and salvation, and you've got to have not have socialism, right? You've got to have
and so what we have in government, even though a lot of them will claim that they may be Catholic, or we have God on our side, one spoke, but the things that they're doing is so contrary to the word of God. It lies, just lies, the father of lies. Okay, so let's go on to another one of your projects that I love. Every Black Life Matters. Tell me how you got involved in that.
So the story of it is actually very interesting. Kevin worked with the Frederick Douglass Foundation, that I'd known him for a long time. And I had my own organization called the Values Advocacy Council, which is an organization out of California. And now we're expanding to Idaho and a few other places.
I want to talk more about that later. I do want to talk about that later.
Yeah. And the basic idea there is to get Christians involved in politics, right? Because Jesus was involved in politics. Right. And we can talk about that. But so my wife was looking at her Facebook, and some of her friends, Christian friends, were out protesting with BLM.
I sent my kids. I didn't know. I sent my kids, and my pastor said, "Hey, I just want you to know that I'm probably gonna go to the Black Lives Matter, yay,
Right,
And so, but at that point, we really didn't understand until we started to do research on it.
Right. So she turned to me and she says, there are two things. That one, they don't know that they're Marxists, and everything they stand for is opposite to what the Bible stands for. But two, they want to show people that they're not racist and they care about Black people, right? Which is a noble thing, right?
Great.
Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that. And so she said, you should call Kevin up and tell him he needs to create an alternative to BLM. So I called Kevin up and I said, "Hey, Kevin, you really should get with the Frederick Douglass Society and get with Dean Nelson, because, the national president." I said, "You guys really need to do this." And he said, great idea. So
going too.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks later, I called him back. I said, "I haven't seen any changes on your website. What's going on?" He said, "Well, I talked to Dean." He says, "We're really busy." So Dean said, "You and I have to do it." I said, "Kevin, I'm not Black." I don't know what. He said, no, but you're African. In fact, he said, "You're more African than I was," because I grew up in Africa. My whole youth was in Africa, right? I mean, so he said, I said, "Okay, fine. I guess we'll do it." So then we said, okay, we need a name that people will recognize that it is very similar to BLM. So we knew we had to have the Black Lives Matters in there somewhere.
Right.
So then we talked about it, and we said, well, the real message really is not that Black lives don't matter, but Black lives matter too. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's really the message, is Black lives also matter. So the question is, how come we can't get that message across? So then we talked about it and we said, okay, how about this? Every Black life matters.
Right.
And so our principles, and it was easy to come up with the principles. We went through their webpage. They've changed their webpage now for BLM, and everything that they were for, we said we'd take the opposite. So they were against nuclear family. So we said traditional family. They were pro-choice. So we said, well, we're pro-life. Right? Our principles, we are pro-life. We are against traditional family. They said, if we looked at it, they were against school choice. Well, we're definitely for school choice. The only thing that we are similar to them in some ways is that we do believe that this needs to be some criminal justice reform. Right? Because there are bad cops that can get fired because of the unions, right? So we work, that's probably the only similarity we have, but everything else came in. So we're pro-life, we're from womb to tomb, we're active fatherhood, traditional family or nuclear family, we're a school choice, we're free markets, they're Marxists, right? They're trained Marxists. And then the other one is criminal justice reform. And then the last one we put in, after a while, we realized we got to add this. So we said nonviolence, right?
Wow.
And that's the key. So that's how we started.
And they did try to say that no, that's not true. People that were marching with them, when they saw the violence, they were saying, wait a minute, this isn't us, this isn't us, this isn't us. But those are the people that didn't understand as well as what they were getting into. And
but understand this, if I went out to do a rally, let's say that we did a pro-life rally one day, and a whole bunch of people came and started burning down clinics, the first thing we do is we do a news announcement that says we are condemn the burning of the clinics, we condemn the risk of life, we condemn all this. BLM never did that. They never came out and make a big stink about, hey, we don't want this. In fact, and then we would say the next time we have pro-life, we'd bring security out there to stop anybody from doing anything like that, right?
Right.
And we'd work with the police really closely to make sure all that stuff. But that never happened. And the reality is that BLM was working with Antifa. I mean, it's a simple truth, right? That they were working with Antifa to make these riots. And of course, you'll notice that all these riots happened only in Democrat cities.
Yep.
Why? Because they knew if they tried in a Republican city, they'd be crushed immediately.
Yes.
Right. It's funny, in Idaho, Antifa showed up in Idaho, right? I've moved to Idaho since then. Antifa showed up in Idaho a few months ago. I don't remember exactly when. And all the Idahoans showed up with their AR-15s, and there was no problems whatsoever, right? Now, you can't do that in a Democrat city. It happened to be in a city that was predominantly conservative, and so nothing happened. It was the most peaceful Antifa riot they'd ever had, right? Or protest they've ever had. Protest all you want.
It's like
you have no problem with protest, but you're not allowed to burn things down, right?
And so, when I hear Antifa, I hear destruction. That's the only thing I see. I just remember this vision of the newscaster. Oh, this is the mostly peaceful protest, and buildings are burning down in the back. Everything's on fire, and some people march on Capitol, and they are thrown in prison. They are, disconnected from their family. They are, I just don't get it.
Horrible.
One thing was said about the burning down of cities from the left.
And here's the sad thing about that. We noticed that those cities, they were not, most of those people with Antifa are white first. Secondly,
yeah, they were white.
Yeah. And secondly, they are young suburban kids. Why don't they burn down their own suburbs? Why do they come to the cities and burn down black homes and black businesses? We had all these people.
They needed somewhere to sleep. They needed somewhere to sleep.
That's going to help blacks.
Burn up everybody else's. Okay, so it gets to my next point. The value.
Okay, well, let me add a couple of things. So what we do now is we teach people about critical race theory, how bad it is, and how Marxist it is, and then we talk about social justice versus real justice. So we'll come in and we'll do this training, and now we're doing we can even work with corporations, because a lot of corporations now need to have a DEI officer. So we can come in and we can be your DEI officers. We can do your sensitivity training, but
what is DEI?
DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay.
Right. So everybody needs, and now they're like, banks are saying, oh, do you have a DEI officer? Do you do DEI training? Well, we'll come in and do your DEI training, but we will train you the right way. Because a lot of times when you bring these other guys in, after they leave, there's a lot of animosity because they're teaching CRT. They're saying, if you're white, you're a racist. And the white people are going, what? And so when they leave, it's like, well, I better not say anything to that black coworker because he's going to think I'm a racist. Now that's going to help.
Exactly.
That's going to make things worse. So we come in and we actually reconcile, and we say, look, there's only one race, and that's the human race. There are different ethnicities, and if you understand the different way different ethnicities work, you can work better together. But it's not a question of one ethnicity is better than another ethnicity. It's just different cultural traditions. There are moral values that are unchanging. There's an objective moral code. There's the unchanging moral value. But there are ethnic practices that are different. And a good example is in India, you would never give anybody money with your left hand.
Really?
Yeah, it's not done. It's considered, some things considered rude, right? So you always pay with the right hand, right? Yeah. And in the Middle East where I grew up, you would never sit in a chair and and cross your legs in such a way that the other person can see the soles of your feet. That's considered offensive, right?
I remember hearing that in college.
Right.
But
here's the thing about it. Most cultures say, well, I know they're from America and I know they don't mean to insult me. They're not going to come and chop your head off just because you show them the bottom of their feet if they're educated, right? So yeah, most cultures don't care. Yeah, do whatever you want. That's fine. We understand that you're not trying to insult me, right? So these are the kind of things that we talk about, and we train people, and we talk about all that stuff, and it actually ends up reuniting the company and reuniting people. So that's a lot of things that we do.
Wow. One thing is kind of a concern for me. In education, I've always worked with students with severe behavior issues. And I know that we have brought in SEL, and I'm actually a coordinator of SEL. And a lot of people are linking that with CRT. And I just really don't agree with that, because the reason why is that with a lot of students, I deal with students in high poverty that have suffered trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And so with this particular student, if we can't figure out how to get those needs met or to get past that hard exterior, we can't get to the learning.
Right.
And so there's what are your thoughts? I'm just curious. You're a very smart man. What are your thoughts?
Thank you.
Because I completely disagree as that being critical race theory.
So it really depends on what you're teaching, because here's the thing, that there is no definition of critical race theory. And so this is one of the things we get. We says, oh, we're not teaching critical race theory. Besides, you don't know what critical race theory is. I'm like, no, I know exactly what critical race theory is, because I'm going all the way back to its Marxist roots. Right? Now, if you tell me you're not teaching any of that, then we're okay. But are you teaching this or this and this? And so we're looking for the thing. So I guess with SEL too, you're really looking at what is it that you're teaching.
Yes, you can sneak crazy into anything. You can sneak crazy into anything.
Exactly. So it has to do with what you're teaching, what the curriculum is, and then do I trust the teacher? Obviously.
So there's Steve Toss. Just kidding.
Right. Now the other thing is,
I like him.
For instance, in business, we have something called an emotional IQ.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Right. And this has a lot to do with how well you can function and react with other people. And so these are other aspects of that people can be concerned about validly. So emotional IQ just means that that when somebody, and emotional IQ is what we all really need, because if somebody slights you, emotional IQ says, well, they didn't mean to slight me.
Right. Okay. Right.
It was an accident, and I'm willing to overlook that, rather than being so angry that they did something that they weren't even intending to do, right?
Yeah. And the anger, the anger is real. I mean, it really is, because I get to hear, I get to hear it, one, because I'm African American. And then I hate that I just said African American, because I'm American, I'm from America. And so, but it is, I wish people can see that the more people try to push this, that there's this racism, it's those people that are actually racist.
Yes.
And okay, so I wanted to go on to the second project that you do, the Values Advocacy Council.
Right.
Give us some info on that.
So the VAC was started in 2003. It was meant to bring Christians into politics. And then I took over. I actually became president in 2015. And we kind of grew the organization. We didn't grow the organization. It was not like we planned how to grow the organization. What happened was we were meeting in a church. The church shut down because of COVID. And so we were like, okay, we don't have a place to meet. So then we started going. So my church shut down too. But a church down the street, Calvary Chapel, San Jose, and I knew the pastor quite well. He said, I'm opening up. I'm going to stay open. So we all went there. So when we got there were about 250 people there. And then I told everybody, hey, if you want to go to a real church instead of that Zoom church, come here. And so they started growing. And then, of course, immediately the Santa Clara County Health Department came to shut them down. And what they did is they put a big poster on there going all the mandates of how to shut down. But these are not laws, these are mandates. So our pastor put the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence right next to it, saying these are my mandates to keep going, right? So we always like to say our church, the Calvary Chapel San Jose, is the finest church in the world because we have $4 million in fines. Now, we're not going to pay a dime of those fines. In fact, we have won almost every lawsuit, every case, and we file lawsuits against them for violating our God-given rights. So, because the Bible says, do not forsake the meeting of the saints. So we've won all those things, we're moving. But as a result of this, we got people started coming to this church, and the church grew from 250 people to 3,000 people within a matter of 8 months.
I need to give a big wow on that. Big wow. And so y'all use the acronym VAC, correct?
So it's Values Advocacy Council. And what we're trying to do is we're standing up for biblical values. And so so the pastor came to me and says, well, you need to have weekly meetings. So we said, okay, we'll have weekly meetings with the VAC. And so we first meeting, we had 150, second meeting, we had 250, and then it kept growing. And then when Simone Gold came to speak, we had 1,800 people show up for our meetings. Wow. So in fact, she's coming back to speak for us again in February 19th in San Jose. So if you're in the area, go to vac.org, and you can even live stream it too. So vac.org. And so
you're based out of California?
We're based out of California, but now we're spreading because we have other churches that want to do the same thing. The advantage of the VAC is that the church can take a political stance without the church taking a political stance.
Okay.
Right? Because the VAC takes.
But the people in the church need to vote.
Well,
they need to vote.
And I can assure you, in our church, almost, I tried to do it was very disappointing. I tried to do a voter registration drive in our church. Mm-hmm. And the way we do our voter registration drive, we say, everybody who's registered to vote, please stand up. And then if you see someone next to you who's not registered to vote, here's a flyer, give it to them and let them fill it out, right? So I thought, oh, great. So I went out to the registrar of voter, the ROV, and I got like 500 voter registration things. And I came and I told everybody stand up. And there were like 5 people still sitting because everybody was registered to vote. Our church was not a good candidate because everybody votes, right? All 3,000.
Wow, that's amazing. Right? That's amazing.
It was a great thing to have. But it's because we're so active in this. And the reason is, and so I wrote a book a few years ago. One of the reasons why I ended up being president of the VAC, they asked me to join because of the book I wrote. I wrote a book called Jesus is Involved in Politics. Why aren't you? Why isn't your church?
Wow.
And the reason behind that was because as an immigrant coming from a foreign country, now you have to understand, I grew up in a Marxist family. My father was a communist. My uncles are communists, and they're very famous communists. One was actually chairman of the or speaker of the World Council of Churches, which is a very Marxist evangelical, or not evangelical, very Marxist Christian organization. So I grew up in this Marxism thing. This is what the arguments we used to have around the table at dinner when I went back to India. So, and my dad was an atheist too until he became a Christian. So I understood that what America had was completely different from what every other country had. And I was seeing how America was going downhill. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And so it bothered me, and I started writing sermons about